Hey devs! Remember how Cursor amazed everyone with its ability to code autonomously? Well, GitHub team just dropped a bomb. Copilot Agent Mode is here. In this video, I will test how it builds a full-stack audio-to-text transcriber app using OpenAI API completely on its own. GitHub team promises that there is almost no actions needed from developer to achieve the goal. Let's see if it lives up to expectations. So what we're gonna build today is the app for transcribing the audio files into text. As a transcriber, I'll use OpenAI API Whisper model. It accepts the audio file and returns the text in response. Our system will consist of a client app which contains all the UI for the user and a server app to serve as a proxy between client and OpenAI platform. I want to see if Copilot's agent mode can create the app on its own, and to start with, as usually, I need to craft a detailed prompt that includes all the requirements. So here I am asking the AI assistant to create a TypeScript web application from scratch, and its main purpose is to get the audio file from the user. The file is in M4A format, and use OpenAI API Whisper model to transcribe it and display the transcription text on UI. I want to use the following technical stack: React plus TypeScript and client-side, and Express.js plus TypeScript for a web server. The server should play a role of a proxy between the client app and OpenAI API. For simplicity, let's assume audio is always recorded in English. From the UI perspective, user initially sees the texty title, let's call it texty, make it stylish, and a single button upload file. When clicked, it should let the user choose the M4A file. Let's validate it to be 20 megabytes or lower size, and the validation should be on both the client and server side. If validation fails, show the human-readable error text on UI. If the upload is successful, the server must use OpenAI SDK to create its transcription. When ready, return it back to UI. The user should see a container with the transcription text appeared. Let's make the text look nice and readable. In general, the app should look like it's in a dark theme. You can use Chatcn for component styles. Let's use .env for environment variables management. Is everything clear? Do you have any questions? And as far as this prompt is pretty big and the task is pretty complex, it is a good practice to ask if everything is clear, if your AI assistant has any clarification questions. You can watch my other video where I describe the tips like this, useful for your coding with AI purpose. And okay, this is our prompt. What I'm gonna do now is that I'll create a new empty folder in my repositories, and let's call it texty. I'll navigate inside of this folder and let's open Code Insiders in it. I am using VS Code Insiders because as of February 2025, Agent Mode is only available in the pre-release version. But I'm sure it becomes available for everyone else soon. If you don't see this feature in your Copilot extension, just install the VS Code Insiders editor and use Copilot extension in it. I'll drop a link to VS Code Insiders download page here in the description. Cool, you can see we are in an empty root folder, and now what I'm gonna do is open the Copilot panel. If you're not familiar with what Copilot Chat is, I have another video covering the main GitHub Copilot features in 15 minutes. Watch it if you need it. Now I'll open the Copilot Edits tab, and I need to switch from Edit to Agent Mode. Regarding the model, I experimented with different models, and for me Claude Sonnet worked the best, so I'll utilize it here. Now I paste the prompt that I crafted before, and let's see what happens when I press enter. Copilot started thinking. It looks like it doesn't have any clarification questions, it understood everything, and here it comes up with the first command. You can see that it wants to create two folders, client and server. And the good thing here is that we can just click on continue, and Agent Mode opens terminal on itself and runs the command that it suggested. And while it created two folders, client and server, it came up with the next command to enter the client directory and to create a React TypeScript app with Vite latest. I'm fully okay with it, so let's continue. Cool. So now if we expand the client directory, we can see that it created the Vite React TypeScript application, which is really cool. It has the sources, and we have everything needed here. It has the app component, which is cool. I like it, everything seems fine, and let's see what it suggests next. Now it wants to install all the dependencies that it needs for styling and Axios for making requests. I'm fully okay with it, but I suspect that this command won't work because we are already in a client folder and it wants to navigate to it. And indeed, there is no such file or directory. And now you can see that it noticed the error on its own. So it observes the terminal, it sees what was the output, and it adapted the terminal command to navigate to client directory by the absolute path and then to install all the dependencies. Let's do it. While it's installing all the dependencies, I want to mention that I am gonna treat it like an experiment with agent mode. I'm gonna trust everything that Copilot suggests and let's see what happens. Now it came up with the next command. It wants to install the needed dependencies. I'm totally fine with it. And if we look to package.json, it indeed added all the needed dependencies that it installed. And now it comes up with the next command. It wants to go to a server and to initialize an empty npm package. Then it wants to install the Express, TypeScript, TS Node, and other dependencies that it wants. Okay, I'm totally fine. Let's continue. And the next step is, again in a server, it wants to initialize the TypeScript configuration. This is a good idea. It's a required step, so let's proceed. After it finished, if we now look to our server folder, we see that all the dependencies are listed in the package.json. That's correct. It also installed the OpenAI SDK, which is cool. We also have the tsconfig.json file. I like it. And now it wants to go back to the client folder and initialize a Tailwind CSS project. I see that it did few steps in the client folder, then it went to server, installed the dependencies and initialized a TypeScript project, and now it wants to go back to the client. I don't like how it moves from one folder to another. As far as we definitely didn't finish in the server folder, it will return back to server then. This is a common problem for humans as well. It's called multitasking, and I can see that agent mode is also vulnerable to multitask, which is not really good. I don't like this, but let's see if it succeeds. Now we see that it tried to initialize the Tailwind project, but it failed. One more time it noticed its error. It changed the command to run in terminal. Let's see if it helps. It didn't help. Okay, it wants to initialize the Tailwind configuration in the file manually. This is cool. It also created the .env file in the server. It again switched to server, which I predicted before. And if we look in the .env, I like that it created the configuration for the port number for the OpenAI API key, which is indeed required, and it's a safe way to store it. And I also like that it parameterized the maximum file size. If I want to change it, I don't need to search where it's mentioned in the code. I can edit it right here, and that's great. Really nice idea. And it started creating the index.ts. It's a main server file. Let's look what it done. It creates an Express application. It initializes the OpenAI SDK. I like it. There is something like a time to leave for a session, so that agent mode isn't like infinitely working, and it asks if we want to continue to iterate. We haven't achieved our goal yet, so yeah, let's continue. It updated the dependencies, it added the scripts to package.json, and if we look into index.ts file further, we see that there is an upload function that uses Malter. Pretty cool. Then we see that it created a REST API endpoint /transcribe, and it creates a transcription using OpenAI SDK with a whisper model and in English language. This is cool. Now it switched back to client, to our main component. Yeah, it adds the UI, it adds the file upload functionality. It also added the file size validation on UI, which is good. And it creates a request to our API to our newly created transcribe endpoint. This is great. And here is the UI. We have the button to upload the audio. Here is the section for the case when file is uploaded. While we're looking in app.tsx, let's give it a chance to continue to run command in terminal. Meanwhile, there is a case for error, there is a case for transcription. I like it. And it comes up with the next command to navigate the server and run it in developer mode. Let's see if it goes smoothly. I don't think so, because I've seen a lot of TypeScript errors in index.ts file, and indeed it doesn't compile. And you can see that Copilot Agent didn't notice this. This is because there was no exit code. The command is streaming the logs, and this is why, I think this is why it didn't catch the errors. So the next thing it wants to do is to run the client app in dev mode. So let's try to start a client app. It created a new terminal, and it looks like the app started successfully. We can follow the link to see the UI. And indeed, here we have our application. I wouldn't say it looks cool, it doesn't. Let me choose the file. It indeed filters only by the correct extension. I like it. So it looks like our UI works, at least it runs, but the app itself won't work. Definitely if this server doesn't run, and we need to fix our server. This is why I'm telling Copilot that the client app works fine, it has the layout issues, but I don't want to concentrate on them right now. Now I want to compile the server app. Let's see if it is able to handle it. I didn't copy the error that I had. The interesting thing is that we can see it checked the index.ts file and 2 problems found. I believe it has a kind of access to VS Code API and it can see the TypeScript errors. Yeah, indeed, it is able to see the TypeScript errors, which is a really great feature. I don't know how many times I copy-pasted the TypeScript errors that I have in my files, and now Copilot can do it on its own. I like this feature really much, so it is fixing the issues. Okay, and as a next step, it wants to install the additional package to handle file uploads properly. I can foresee that this will be a problem of many future applications which are AI written, mostly because I often seen this issue amongst junior developers who try to install a library for a small problem to fix. I foresee that this problem will persist across the future code repositories which are mainly AI written. I think they will all have such a problem with a lot of packages which are not needed so much. Okay, it successfully installed the package it wanted. It states that there are no more TypeScript errors in the server. It should compile and run correctly. And it asks if I'd like it to start the server. Yes, I definitely want. Pretty cool thing, it detected that we have both server and client apps are running. It doesn't remember in which folder we currently are. This is why it's always starting a new command with navigating to the folder it wants, but it remembers what is going on in the terminal, and it sees that the server is still having the TypeScript compilation errors, and it is fixing it. Meanwhile, I'll restart the server on my own. And yeah, it did something in index.ts file, and now I see that the server is running at localhost 3000. This is great. Now it wants to run the server. It forgot that we are having the server running in the terminal. So its memory is like inconsistent. I stopped the server by myself and let it run it. It's running successfully again on the port that was defined in .env file. Okay, so I think it's time to test the end-to-end scenario. Let's choose a file. It's selected, we see the start transcription button appeared. Let's click it. It created a request, but the request failed with a 500 error. And it's because of invalid API key. Indeed, I didn't paste my OpenAI API key. This is no surprise that it fails. This is my fault. Let me fix it. And I pasted my API key off screen, and let's return to our application and see if it's working now. And now I refresh the page to start from scratch. Let's choose an audio file and start transcription. Wow! GitHub's Copilot Agent Mode just decrypted this message. Isn't that cool? Yeah, it's definitely cool. So this was an audio that I recorded beforehand, and it successfully transcribed it. So we can see that the end-to-end scenario worked. We can elaborate more on this application because I don't like the UI. In general, it is usable, but I like when everything is formatted like better, when the layout looks better and designed better. The main scenario works. The client and server apps are up and running. The server uses the OpenAI API to transcribe the audio and successfully returns it to the client. Okay, so now let's summarize what we've just seen. Let's start with what was good. So it successfully built a full-stack app with OpenAI API integration, which is really cool. It was my main goal, and it successfully completed it. And this is why I will give Copilot Agent Mode more and more tries, definitely. The next thing I want to highlight is that I had to make just one follow-up to make it work. So if you remember, the server app didn't start because of TypeScript errors that it didn't notice, and it required input from me to understand that it doesn't work. From all the other standpoints, it didn't do each step like ideally. It did some errors, but it didn't require any input from me to resolve those errors. Agent Mode successfully noticed them and fixed on its own, and I believe this is really cool that currently AI in a shape that it can do things like that. The Agent Mode UI looks like a Copilot chat. It was not ideal, but it was clear enough for me to use it without any learning materials. I just entered the Agent Mode and started from there. It took me, I don't know, 3 or 5 minutes to understand what is going on. I like the UI mostly. Maybe it's not ideal from the standpoint of how it works with terminal, how it applies the changes. There could be some improvements, but in general the UI is cool. And the next thing, really important, that this app was built in around 15 minutes. I don't know how much time would it take to me personally to build such an application. Maybe I will do such an experiment in my free time, but I am sure it definitely will take me more than 15 minutes. I cannot generate the code as quickly as Copilot does, and probably I would have more errors or issues on my way which I would need to resolve, and I believe it would take much more than 15 minutes, something between 30, 60, around that. And now let's move to what was not so good yet. It doesn't hold the context of current directory. Maybe it's not a huge problem, but it comes up with a terminal command which doesn't work because the first change directory didn't work. And this is like annoying. I'm pretty sure it is easy fixable, so just as it is. The second thing that annoyed me was multitasking. If you remember, it switched back and forth between the client and server apps, and I would like it to start with the server app and finish it till the end until it runs, and then to go to the client app, and only then to make something like an integration between them if everything doesn't go smoothly. For me, as for the user, when it jumps from client to server and back to client and back to server, I lose the context as a user, and this is not so good. I would like it to be more stable, to take one task, to finish it to some logical end, and only then to switch to another application or another task. So I think we can live with it, but it's better to be fixed. And regarding the UI it generated, the layout was not structured enough. It felt like like it is a broken markup or something, I don't know. We could elaborate more. After we finished with end-to-end testing, I could ask it to make UI more pretty, so not like a huge problem, but I didn't like that the UI was weird. The next thing, rather critical, pretty critical, is that the code structure sucks. It generated the React app with only one single component. I understand that the functionality is pretty straightforward and pretty simple, but the code is not maintainable. If I'd like to extend the functionality, I would start with refactoring. I don't like to start with refactor. I like when the code is maintainable and scalable. The same for the server. It stores all the logic in only one single index TypeScript file, which is also not good. I didn't see any like controllers, routes, or services to work with OpenAI. Everything was like a mess in one single file. That's also not really good. Probably this is a gap in my prompt. I didn't ask it to write the maintainable code, to be honest, and probably if I would, it would make some other decisions, but I am not sure that it would build everything without any interruptions from my side in this case, if the code structure was more complex. So I don't know, I didn't like how it structured the code. This is like a negative point. And the last thing I wanted to mention, it installed too many dependencies. I'm pretty sure we don't need so many dependencies in such an application with that level of functionality. Those dependencies are not needed so much, so it is not really good, not really critical, but I believe it will be a common problem because AI assistants are lazy as humans are, and they don't want to think how to implement this functionality. Much more easy, convenient, and straightforward thing is to install the dependency and then to call one method from it, and this is it. I believe this fix is not so easy. I believe we will face this problem as a common problem with AI assistants, but it is what it is. I expected that we will have such an issue, and we indeed have it, so nothing surprising here. But in general, I really liked the agent mode. I will try to use it more, maybe starting from my pet projects. And I want you to remember that this is an experimental feature which is not yet even delivered to VS Code users. It is pretty raw. And I believe the GitHub Copilot team will work on this, will fix the most obvious issues quickly, and agent mode will be usable in the nearest time. And it's, a great opportunity for us to try to test it, to adapt our mindset to AI first coding. And I believe, despite all the negative points here, this feature is awesome. This is a future of coding, and I hope this video inspired you to try it. As usual, if you learned something new today, please smash that like button. This will help YouTube recommend you more videos like this, and it will also push the algorithm to show my video to a larger audience, so I think it's a win-win situation. And don't forget to subscribe for more AI coding tips and tools that will supercharge your development workflows.